Hello, so I'm doing another rose video just to show you how to make a slightly fuller rose with more of a center and to show you different sizes of roses. So what you need is a rolling pin, either some petal base or a vegetable shortening to use on your silicone mat so your icing doesn't stick, a cocktail stick, a round cutter. I have used different sizes and that I'll show you at the end of the video the various sizes, and Renshaw modeling paste or flower modeling paste. So I make all my buds out of the flower modeling paste and I make them up the night before. They need to be about 3/4 of the size of the actual cutter that you're going to use for your roses. Dip a cocktail stick in some sugar glue and pop that into the bud. So for my quick roses that I use on my cakes, I like to use Renshaw flower and modeling paste. I like this brand specifically for the fact that it dries very quickly. So when I'm working with it, my roses are dried within an hour, hour and a half, and I can put them directly on the cakes. I don't tend to make roses up too long before I actually add them to the cakes. While I'm rolling this out, you will see to the left hand side I've got a little pot. I keep that on my mat with my icing underneath just to stop it from drying out while I'm actually rolling out paste and working with my rose itself. So roll your paste as thin as you possibly can. You want to be able to just see your mat through your paste. The thinner you can get your petal, obviously the better the rose is actually going to look. So I'm cutting out 8 pieces here to start with. We will actually only use 7, but I'm going to do the center almost double compared to my other video that I did. So I cut out 8, but I will only use 7. Just gently cut out, and as if they do lift up, just set to the side. You're going to use these straight away on your bud so that they don't dry out too quickly. So you kind of, when I'm doing a couple of roses, I do like a production line. As you can see, it's really thin, like paper thin, how thin I've rolled it. So literally just get all your petals together, and then you're going to get a bud ready to start making your actual rose. So if you get your bud, a little bit of sugar glue. I make sugar glue by melting, pouring some hot water over some sugar paste in a little tub, and that's what I use for my sugar glue. Brush all the way around the bud and get your first petal. Place it just where the bud starts sort of curving underneath. And I'm just going to show you from the front exactly where it is. You can see it comes up above the tip of the bud just a little bit. I always fold it in this way facing myself so I can see what I'm doing. So fold over one piece and then pull the other piece over to seal the bud so that it's got a lovely little point to close your bud. Now get another petal and you're going to brush over the join to start with and just add your petal on. And you're not going to press too hard, you're not going to try and close this too much, you're just literally worrying about it sticking just on the bottom of the bud. Get your next petal, you take it probably about halfway over the first petal and around the bud a little bit more. It must be poking out on the sides just a little bit so that when you put the next layer on, it pushes the petals out slightly. So as you go around for your third one, take the first one back off the bud a little bit because you're going to go over the second petal and under the first petal so that it really feeds over and under. Tuck it in nicely and then close that first one again, and you've got your first layer on. I'll always go around and just make sure that it's properly sealed at the bottom so there's no pieces that are going to dry at the bottom and cause problems. So it's really sealed on the base of the bud. Now you're going to add another layer. I'm only going to add 3 again here. You're using the same basic principle of layering over. Start over a join though and just put your first petal on. I'm just showing you there how to put it over the join itself. A little bit of glue over the petal, and about 1/4 of the way this time you put the second petal and around the bud, and then once again you're going to pull that first one back a little bit of glue over the second one and under the first one, and bring your third petal over and under. So as I said, I did cut an extra one, but you don't need it. You only need 3 and 3 to do the bud part to start with. Now just gently press around the base of the bud again to make sure it's properly all stuck down, and just with your fingers you're going to bend these petals back slightly You don't want a massive curl in it, you just want to bend these back slightly. It just kind of starts the rose effect, and also when you add your next layer on, it's going to push those petals out from the rose to give you a bit more of an open look to it. So just set this aside now. For the next layers, you're going to need 4, 5 and 5 petals. Now you're going to get your cocktail stick, and this is where you're going to curl the petals to actually give them some sort of rose effect. So all I do is I hold it near the edge of my petal or my circle, and use the cocktail stick just on the edge there and gently curl back a piece of icing over the cocktail stick. You want a nice little point at the top, and you don't want to make this too big or too long. I'm going to show you how not to do it too, because you will see the difference in the way it looks. So if you do it a little bit too long, you get too much of a point and you have a triangular shape, which when you start putting them all together on the rose just doesn't look quite right. And again, I'm going to show you how to, if you do it too long and too fat, again, you're getting it in a very triangular shape, and it just won't look right on the rose. So you need it to almost still be a little bit rounded, even though you've curled the edges. Don't leave too much of a gap in between either, because you get a bit of a square look. So it's just getting that right sort of shape on it, that it gives it a lovely petal look without being overdone or underdone, basically. So then I'm going to show you again, this is how we actually do the proper petal. So you've got that slight curve, and as you put them together, you'll see it works. So for my layers of 5 petals, these petals I curl the edges and I lay them face down. The reason I do this is for these layers, I add the glue along the bottom to add to my rose. It sticks better. So now I'm going to add the 3rd layer of petals onto my rose, and these are the 4 petals we're going to use. So once again, start over a join, a little bit of glue onto the petal, onto the rose itself. And again, this time I've come down slightly with the petal, not too much, just slightly down the bud a little bit more. So you stick that on. Again, don't close it too much. You literally are feeding the petals over one another, and you're doing it about 1/4 of the way over with glue and around the bud, and then you're feeding over so that you're leaving a little bit open on the side, so it will push the next layer of petals out a little bit. So just like we did with the other 2 layers, you pull the first one back and then you feed the 3rd one over and under the first petal. So you've got that proper overlapping look that you should get with a rose. Now I use these roses on all my cakes, but sometimes I just like to make them a bit fuller like this, just for extra effect. And obviously if I've got a little bit of time, I prefer to actually have them a bit fuller on the cake. You don't need to change the size of the petals at all for the whole rose. You keep the same size cutter. So as you'll see, I'm doing a layer of 5 now, and this time I actually brush the glue onto the petal. I find when I'm getting to the layers that are going out a bit more, it's better to actually have the glue on the petal rather than on the bud. It sticks better. So again, start over a join, and you're coming down slightly more with the petals again. So they're going a little bit lower and lower on the bud, each layer that you're adding on. So just come around and you will stick 1/4 of the way over and around, and then again, once you get to adding your 5th petal, pull your first one out and feed that over and under. So for this rose, I've done a layer of 3, a layer of 3, and then 4, and then 5, and I'm going to add another layer of 5. If you wanted to make it any bigger, I would suggest using a bigger cutter for a bigger rose, but then you would go 6 and 6. So you tend to use 2 layers of the same number, except the number 4. I don't repeat that one. I just do 4 once. So this is for your last layer, and you're going to use exactly the same steps that you've used before. These, it helps when they've been sitting on the side a little bit, because they dry a little bit more and they're easier to actually add onto the flower. You can hang your rose upside down to make sure you're sticking it properly on the bottom. That's why I suggest making the buds the night before, so that that cocktail stick is really stuck properly in that bud and that's properly dried. And you will see now I've come right down with the petals, that they're almost closing the whole bud at the bottom. You barely see any of the bud. It just opens the rose really nicely. And these really are simple roses. There's not much fuss to them. They're not overdone. they're basically the only flowers that I can really make, that I enjoy making without wires. So literally pull that first one back. Now always on the last layer, I always put my rose face down to make sure it's properly stuck at the bottom so that the petals really do stick. On larger flowers you will find they might flop back, but just add a little bit of glue where needed and push your petal back in. Just using the back of my paintbrush to open this rose just a little bit to give it more of an open look. So that's the fuller rose, and I'm going to show you here, that's just the basic rose with a layer of 4 or 3, 4 and 5 instead of the 3, 3, 4, 5, 5. So I'm going to show you all the different sizes. These are my favorite sizes to use. So this is a 35mm round cutter, and that's what I use for all my medium roses and what I used in this actual video for the rose that I made. The next size up is 40mm, and that's for my larger rose. I don't tend to go bigger than this because I never find like I actually need to. And then the smallest one that I use is 25mm, and that's for my little roses.